Hello, Just Jax here and welcome to my channel. First things first, improvements. The picture is clear, it's in focus, the camera is higher up, I've got the tripod in use now, I've got the big light in use now, I've got the mic hooked up, so all things should be good in this recording. Fingers crossed there'll be no voiceover, it can be commentary as I'm going, like running dialogue. And yeah, clearer image, much clearer. Feeling really positive about this. So hopefully, oh yes, and also the image is no longer being recorded upside down, courtesy of the tripod. This is being recorded the right way up, so I don't have to rotate it in editing anymore, which is going to be a massive time saver. So, what we're going to do today? Well, this is the next canvas. This is the 5th canvas of the 6 that I'm doing for my friend. And in this one, it's going to be a cosmic / galactic background. Again, the same running theme, blues and purples. So yeah, cosmic background, very colourful, but not, it needs to be colourful because the foreground, at the forefront, that's going to be a silhouette of a cat playing with planets. And the cat's going to all be black, its silhouette, and so are the planets. So it's really important that the background colour can withstand that. So we don't want any black in the background. We're just going to keep to blues and purples. And lighten it up from there. So we have our canvas, we have a test piece of paper, because we're going to use this first to have a little experiment on as to how we're going to cover the canvas in colour. Got my trusty plate, my water, my brushes, and the paints that I'm going to use initially over here. Clean this randomly in a pot. So let's move the canvas for a moment. We don't want anything to happen to that. I'm going to pop that hopefully behind me like before. Lovely. Right, an experiment. So we'll turn this way for now, because this is just an experiment. So obviously we don't need it working. We don't need it portrait. We can just play with it landscape. Then let's just get some colours out there. So we're going to go with the Ultramarine Blue again. We'll get a healthy bit of that to begin with, because this is going to be a bit of experimenting. Some of the Cerulean Blue, which is really nice. I do like that blue. We'll be getting a little bit of white in the mix, but not too much this time. So we want more colour. Not that the white made it wishy-washy last time, but a bit more colour. And we're going to add a tiny bit of silver. Just a tiny bit. To see if that's going to work with the background. Or whether, because we'll have a few stars sort of smattered about. But we'll see. Might save the silver for that. I'll try and get that out of the reflection for you. So, first things first, we need a good brush. And this is going to be a big picture, so don't be afraid to pick a big brush, or a chunky brush at least. I'm probably going to go with this one. Yeah. Well, with the Galactic, I initially thought, what I do, slap some paint on, slip it around, see what we got. And I saw a really nice image. And it kind of reminded me of how we did the cloud technique. So I'm going to try first. Oh, we need purple on there as well. I'm going to try first watering down a load of these to make them really runny. And see what happens when we essentially cloud the whole page. So lots of water. We may as well, since we've got purple on the brush, we may as well start with purple. And let's just see. Because we want it to be more watery than that. And what we're going to want is for this to all bleed in with one another. So let's just get nice and liberal with that to begin with, and then let's try. We're not going to bother cleaning the brush too much because we're going to want the merge of colours as we go in. Then we're going to try and get some blue in there as well. Again, water that right down. Get it to come in here. Now this is going to look a bit messy initially because this is the background, and some things do look messy when you start up. You've got to work it to get it to all go where you want it to go. Now, much like the clouds, initially it'll look like you've barely put anything on there, but then as you build it up and up, put that there for a second, as you build it up and up, that's when it'll really come through as to what you're doing. Now when you're using paint as watery as this, you want to keep it moving as much as possible so you don't get these lines, but they're not going to be so much of an issue when you've built up the layers. So maybe scraping a touch of white there, again really watery. I'm thinking perhaps this is where you can adjust it as you go in. So a lot of this I've like spread around. This one I'm more dabbing, and that definitely has a much better effect. So we'll remember that as we go in. The dabbing's probably the better way forward to get what we want. So let's work with that a little bit more. Now we'll probably have to have a little pause after this because it's really wet, and we're going to want to see how it looks before we commit to it. So we're going to go quite wide. We might apply it in a few different techniques. So we'll remember over on the right hand side we were spreading it about quite brush like, and then towards the center it was more splodging, which I'm definitely swaying towards right now because it's looking amazing compared to the brush strokes. Get lots of colour on that brush, well, lots of watery colour. Yeah, the dabbing is so much better. Yeah, I'm gonna try and resist the temptation to get my hands involved, because with the background I don't want fingerprints. So let's get a bit more of this purple. We'll try dabbing the purple over on the left hand side here. Really load it up with water. Yep, this is definitely, I'm so swaying towards the dabbing. Now obviously we're not going to go up to the edges on here, so this is the test bit, but on the main canvas we will cover the whole thing like this. Let's get some of that lovely blue just by itself. Yeah, I think as you've seen in my other videos, even though I couldn't comment, I was originally commenting through them, it's like once you sort of get an idea you tend to kind of stick with it if it's you've tried and it's really working, like that is. And the beautiful thing with working with such wet paint and you're trying to create these sort of smoky wispy effects is they'll bleed into one another. Let's get some of this darker blue back in here, see what we can do. Now obviously the paper's going to start going all ripply because it's soaking up the water. The canvas won't do that. It won't go all ripply. Yeah, I think this is our galactic background. Now it's going to take quite a bit of building up, because as you can see, this, doing it washy style, doesn't put a whole lot of colour on the paper. But trust me, like I think I said before, many light layers are better than one thick one sometimes, and definitely in this case, this will start to come together the more you build it up. Got to just try and remember to keep it really watery and resist the temptation to drag the brush across the page. And then we come over here where we started to dry a bit. We start build it up a bit more. Let's have a look while we're going. We're going to add a little bit of silver in there and see what happens when we put some silver. It'll either go wrong or it'll either go right. Let's find out. Okay, yeah, I think when it's so watered down like that, you're not going to get a big old burst of metallic rock up, or too much to detract from the image. I think you can get away with the silver when it's so washed down. We'll have to see when it dries, after we've built up a few more layers as well. Let's get a bit more of that dark blue. Maybe a bit more up here. I'm trying different ways rather than just dabbing, seeing what happens if I can like roll the brush over. That's not having a bad effect. Let's try bringing a bit more purple down this bottom right hand corner, using a similar sort of thing. I need to make it a little bit more watery. Come to the middle a bit. Put a little white through there, see what happens. We don't want a whole heap of white, we just want it to adjust our palette ever so slightly. For a little bit of variation. Try bringing you up there. Bring you back down here. Where the page is all lumped up. Now I wouldn't worry too much. You'll get some little bubbles appear because we've got such watery paint and the air whipping out with the brush as we're dabbing it. But I think that's going to add to the effect here, so I'm not worried about that. We'll bring this a bit down here. We're going to ignore the edges. The edges aren't what we're focusing on. We're going to focus in on this section. So we'll add a little bit more just for the moment. Then we're going to pop this one over to the side somewhere so it can dry, and then we'll add a few more wash layers and build it up like we did the clouds, and see how that works for us. And then what we'll do in the meantime is we want a couple of tests going. Find somewhere flat to put that for the moment. Flat enough. So we'll do a test where we apply it more outright. Let's just get my paper out. Right. So we'll have a look at it. Again, just using the brush. So we'll start over this side and we'll try just adding outright non-diluted or watered down paint and see what sort of effect we get. If we keep pressing it out. We'll spread it as far as we can. Again, working fairly quick here because we want to start to get those lines where it's set in. Try adding a bit of blue. What's going to be nice about this as well, like for different reasons, is this will also merge. Get a little tiny bit of silver rubbed in here and see what happens. This doesn't seem, this is getting its charm as well, you know. This will take, well, they're both going to take time in their own rights. So see, the watered down paint you have to let dry for quite a while. And this one you don't have to let dry for quite a while. So it's going on essentially raw. Acrylics dry pretty quick, especially when you're applying them as thin as this. Let's go for a bit. And they do their own little sort of blend as they're going. If you're working wet on wet, you don't have to just go. I'm going swirls because it really gets the paint around a bit quicker, but you can add brush strokes in any which direction you want to drag the paint, really, because you're spreading it about so, well, you're pushing it into the paper really, so you up close you can see the brush strokes, but back here it's looking more blended. So we'll see what, oh, that's way too much white. We'll see what happens if we bring some white in the mix. That down there. Purple again. Now see, this is definitely getting its appeal as well from me. It's going to be a slower build up. And with how I want this background to look, it's not going to be stripe, 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 stripe. It's going to be more like building up a massive chunk, say down this corner somewhere, wisping up into the middle. You bring a little silver in there. White, bit silver, bit white, bit silver. We need to keep this general zone. We'll make it a little bluey. So as long as it's all purple in this corner. It's getting a charm of itself. I think we're going to be sticking with the watered down paint, but we'll give a few more goes over here. There's a few more different things we can do to try. that brush nice and clean. This is where the kitchen roll comes in. Now let's see, do we have a sponge to hand? Kitchen roll won't do this next one. We're going to need a sponge. So hopefully I can find a sponge. Okay, we have a sponge that I just robbed from the sink. I've sliced a piece off. Let's have a go at this. Now this is a slightly damp sponge, so we're going to try that first. Again, we're going to start with the purple. Ooh, now this has a whole different charm to it. Get some blue. Bit purple on one side, bit blue on the other. Do a bit of this. This is getting a bit of a charm. This will be a bit more of a build-up, like the watered down one, like the cloud effect. Because this will require a little bit of drying time, a little bit of build-up. Obviously you can see the colour being applied so neat. It's so much bolder. Applying it watered down, it's almost on the verge of semi-transparent. So because we need the background to be able to withstand the black of the cat and carry itself as well, but we don't want it so dark that the cat doesn't really stand out. So that's why I think it'd be a case of, if we do the sponge or the cloud effect, it'll be layers. So I don't know if this is dry enough to start to build it up to the vibrancy that you want. And yeah, that's one thing that you develop in art as well. You can get antsy and you press things as you do. You do develop a whole heap of patience, because you can't rush things sometimes. If you want them to come out beautiful and how you see them in your mind, you have to take your time. You have to slow down. Have little pauses in between. That doesn't mean you can't do anything in those gaps. Like once I've started the actual canvas, once we've decided what we're going to do, how we're going to apply the paint, what would be the best technique, well, while that's drying, we'll be coming back to either this one, if we choose the sponge or the thick application, or the watered down cloud one, to have another experiment on for the next layer, which will be some light stars. So I did stars in the Starry Night Sky canvases, but in this sort of galactic / cosmic background, we don't want to see them so readily. So we're not going to use the back of a paintbrush basically to like dot 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 dot. That's where it's going to get a little bit messy. We're probably going to do more flicking. So you can use the bristles and flick them, or a toothbrush is really good for that. Toothbrush is really good. It's going to be messy, but it's also going to be fun. And it'll give you what you want. Because you don't, when you're doing some of these things with nature, or like, you know, with a nature sort of theme, an organic sort of theme, you don't want to get too, like, this must be here, this must be there, and the stars can only be like one here, one here, one. It's just let them go wherever they go. They will choose where to land. As long as you're aiming at the paper or the canvas, they will choose where to land. So we now have, we'll try the white as well, see what that does. So we now have a little bit of a test strip, well, 2 test strips to work with here, using a couple of different techniques to start off. So thickly applied with paintbrush, sponge, watered paintbrush. Try watered sponge. So look, we've got a little space in the middle, so let's try. If we just do a bit, I mean, do we need to like just do that and let it just fall where it falls? Just drag it out a little bit maybe. This could be the bit that joins the two. Nah, I don't think that's... Let's just squeeze it out and find out. I don't think it really wants to leave a print of the sponge behind. But we'll see. Once it's dry, it might actually... I'm going right now, but it might be really good actually. Let's try loading it up with a bit of silver, soaking it. Can we get some of that silver? That might be more of an over the top layer. Right. I think what we'll do for now is we will pause, leave the sponge in there for a moment. Oh yes, pardon any creaking that keeps going down. The stool that I'm sat on is a creaky little so-and-so. I'm going to try and minimise that. And of course, said I wasn't going to get my hands in there, but you know, paint is paint. So we're going to let this one dry along with the cloud one. We'll come back after they've dried and then we'll decide, well, the cloud one, which I need to put on a flat surface because it isn't flat and it's all gathering in a pool at the moment. The cloud one we'll come back to and add another layer and see how that looks. This one, well, we'll see. These might all need an extra layer, see if they can get better. I'm not too fussed about the paintbrush, the thick paint here. That's not really getting the effect I want. But then this is just layer one. It can change. The sponge isn't too bad, and the dripping of the sponge and dabbing it around didn't prove too bad either. Because we can use the running as well to our benefit. Because that's going to give... Oh, actually, we'll have to remember. This is also sponge dripped on, dabbed about, and then rolled around. Because that is creating some really nice organic lines in there. So yeah, this is where we're at for now. We're going to take a pause and we'll come back when everything's dry. Okay, we're back. So this has dried enough to start working on. Again, there's a little bit, that's the bit that I was referencing earlier on where the paper had gone like that on a not so flat surface and they all gathered. But that does not matter. We're going to build up the next layer, see how this looks. Because this is definitely looking like the sort of effect we want. We just want it as bold as this one up here. I don't think... Oh, the sponge effect. I forgot about the sponge effect. That might be good. I'll do a sponge on a portion of this. Or maybe just down here because that's dry enough. There's still a bit of a wet pool up there. Let's move that one out of the way for a second. and we will add trusty cling film, and we will add our next layer. Put that over there for now, and see how this builds up. But we will need a bit more purple. Let's just splodge a touch more purple on there. And let's start building up. So we're not hammering down so hard this time. I see we've got a hair trailing, so let's pop you out the way. We'll apply this next layer a little bit slower. We'll build up around the purple that we've placed and try and refrain from actually brush stroking anything. A bit more on there. Come over here as well, put a bit more over here. On there, load it up good. Bring a bit up here, because there's the odd little in there. And here we'll get some of that that's already pooled. And let's look at bringing this up a bit more. And we'll start taking that blue in there. Again, we'll have to constantly load up with water. To get this effect, we need so much water to get the paint running and pooling. Let's get a bit more blue in that. Bring this in here. We want to try and keep letting the wet touch the wet of the different colours and the different shades, so they all push into one another a little bit. We'll start bringing some of this over here. And if you feel like a portion of it's too dry already to start merging, just go back and get a bit more of that purple in there. Oh, now this is where we're starting to see a bit more of how bold we're going to want it to be. I'll bring that up there a little bit. Let's get some of that really, well, that ultramarine blue. Let's get a nice bit of that in there. So that's all coming up here. A bit more water. Load that brush up. Treating it almost like a sponge, with letting it just absorb as much water and watery paint as possible. Get a bit of that white pulled in there. Only a little bit. This blue, the Cerulean Blue. Really load that up, maybe give it a bit more water as well. So it gets to the point where it's almost like you're pushing the water around the page. You're barely touching the paper itself. You're trying to just dab that watery paint around and letting it just spread. Let's get some more purple over here. I think this is, at the moment anyway, this is our winning. Let's drag that silver in. This is our winning technique. Really load that one up. Bring that in up here. And the purple, get that purple back in there. Really load that one up. More to bleed a bit, the paint to bleed all into one another, and that is what it's called when your wets merge. Put a bit of that in there, a bit more blue, load that up. That up here. A bit more water. I think this is going to be the one. It'll probably take four layers like this before we get into the point where we're going to be happy with how rich the colour is. I'm not going to do 4 on the test. If I am confident enough after this little test and the little test with the sponge, I'll test the paintbrush as well with the loaded paint, because you never know, as you build up the layers, things change, things happen. I think we're most likely going to go with this one, but like I said, we'll have a little look with the other one in a second. Try and drag a bit more white in there, see. Now as you're working with really, really watery paint, you want to run the brush through it a lot so that it really breaks down. So I don't think you can see from there, but when you drag in, say, the white, and you don't break it down properly, you can see the little specks of white there. You want it to be so broken down that it does look like coloured water. You don't want to see any matter in there, no little specks of solid paint, just watery paint. Like I say, just coloured water. Get some more purple. Need a bit more purple in that zone. Really load it up. More of that blue. Again, really broken down. Really watered up. Bring this over here. What we want to aim for, and like I say, this will not pool so much because the page is rippling on the canvas. The canvas will be able to withstand a lot more grief than paper can. bring that? Let's bring that silver into the purple. Really load it up. Really wet it. Come up here. I think, like I say, at the moment this is looking like what we're going to do. So let's just, for the moment, let's just put this aside. Let's say keep it fair. Bring the other one in. Put this really, really, really wet one over there. It will gather in its places. Right, we'll give this one, to keep it fair, whoops, another touch, just to see in case we're missing something that's going to come up in the subsequent layers. So we'll get the not so wet paint on the end there, and let's just have a go at building this. Bit that blue. I mean, it is having its own charm. I just don't think it's quite right for our background. I do still think the water built up is going to be the way forward, but let's continue anyway. See what we get. As I say, it can still surprise you. You think you know, well, at this point you probably do know what you want, but like I said, things do change when you start layering. Now the only thing I'm not so hot on is with all the brush strokes. I don't really want them. So let's just do a little bit more. I mean, the silver might be a nice after effect. Let's see what happens if we get a bit white in there. See, there are elements to this brush application that I like. What if we bring some of that over the top of here to be bringing it out? It's starting to come together down here a little bit. This bit here is not looking anywhere near as brushstrokey as up here, but it's also a bit more solid. I do want a little bit of a wisp to it, which is where the water's going to come in, because see, where it pools a bit more, you'll have more condensed colour, and where it's not pooled, you'll have this more semi-transparent, which I think is going to work more in our favour. So we'll just leave that one for the moment. Then we'll come over here to the sponge one. Let's just leave you there for now. So let's just give the sponge a good old squeeze out. So we don't want it that wet, not for this piece. And let's just try. See how this looks if we start to put more layers on it. it's having a nice effect, but it's not. It looks nice for a different job. I don't think this is the technique for our galaxy. It's very nice, but I don't think this is going to be the one. Let's just give it a bit more. I want to give everything as fair a test as possible. Yeah, this isn't really looking like it's the one. So, last one is the wet one. So let's go back to this. Try and get a different shade. Smatter around a little bit. Oh yeah, and we did have it like dribbling around, didn't we? So let's put some on there, dot it around a little bit. And then let it sort of take some of its own. So there is some charm to this. Let's let it just go a bit rogue over everything. And let's, instead of spreading it around, let's go, oh, that might be a bit too. Might need to actually dot that around a little bit. Give it a little bit of structure, otherwise it's just going to run off like raindrops down the side of the car. Down a window. Right, let's put that over there for now. Give that a bit more. Let's see what happens. Let's get the purple. That might be a bit too much. Let's see. So much on there now, far too much. Well, that being said, let's just, this has got to be emptied now, that's rather murky water. Let's send this all down here for a second and see what we got if we just, this might be an idea too. The excess down there again. That's having a really nice effect as well. This is a bit of a game changer. Though this is what I'm talking about with the specks of white that haven't been. We don't want them. Or do we? Nah. We just want the background colour. This is a possibility. This is a heavy loaded water page that I'll just let run everywhere. What to do? Because I do really like, let's bring that one back over here and have a look see at the moment. Oop. I do really like this one. Ignoring all the bold stripes that are running through it right now. But we could always do a combination of them both maybe. I think we're going to go with this. We're going to go, I know it's hard to tell right now because it's all shiny. And there it looks like a bit of an alien jungle. But ignoring all these veins and focusing on the effect that it's had back here, which is what these would turn into when they're dry. They won't be like veins. They'll fizzle out. They will do things about certain splodges like that. We don't want distinct splodge. I think this is going to be the way to do it. So I think we should get a little cleared up, get some clean water, and apply the first layer to the canvas. So that's what we're going to do. So I will be right back. We're going to get this one out of the way. That's fine how it is to use, to be honest. Clean water, sort the brush out, and crack on. So back in a second.